All right, everybody. Hello. I am Samori Benjamin, and I'm being joined here by Drew Saunders. And Drew and I, we are doing a podcast here on sports and politics. And Drew and I, we met at Columbia School of Journalism when we each received our master's in journalism from Columbia. And yes, I am a big sports person. Drew is a big news person, and we have come together to give you all a interesting podcast on sports and politics. And of course, as we begin our first podcast, there was major news here in New York City, where I'm from. Drew is from the Michigan area, but the tragic shooting in Midtown involving a gunman who drove from Las Vegas to a building where he was targeting the NFL and ended up not reaching the NFL offices, but he shot and killed four people, and he blamed CTE, which is a brain disease caused. Partly, it can be caused by football, and Drew and I will get into that later. But Drew, how's everything going on out of Michigan?
Things are going great. The haze from the wildfires from Canada is starting to lift up a bit. It's covering basically the entire East Coast, I think. And it's starting to lift a little, and summer's in full swing. We're finally in tomato season, so I always like that. But the cost of living is going up. The cost of sports, of being a sports fan in general, is going up just as much as groceries is, I think. And that is really kind of what we would like to get into the middle of with this podcast. We life goes on, and despite whatever the news is, whatever happens in the news. But connecting the dots between that and relating it to something as relatable as sports is kind of the whole point of the Roaring Line.
Yes, yes, and in sports and politics, it intertwines not only together, but it intertwines with so much of what is going on in society. And it's the summertime, middle of the summer, and I myself, one thing that I always enjoy doing in the summertime is going to the Midsummer Classic, which is also known as the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. And a couple of weeks back now, I was in Atlanta, which is where the All-Star game was, and it was supposed to be the host of the All-Star game 4 years ago, but the game was pulled from Atlanta 4 years ago due to a bill that was passed in Georgia in 2021, that same year, 2021, 4 years ago, which created voting restrictions for citizens, which made it more difficult for several residents there to vote. One of the more interesting things about Atlanta, and it's also interesting because right there, sports and politics mixing, where MLB felt like, you know what, Georgia right now does not deserve what they did is wrong, so we're going to let them understand that and protest that bill they passed. So MLB put them on punishment for a little bit, but one of the more interesting things about Atlanta, and I'm somebody who I play baseball, big baseball fan, I cover baseball, so always interested in. And there's been a decline of Black American players in Major League Baseball and just in the sport period. But Atlanta produces a lot of Black American players, a lot of Black American players who are in Major League Baseball. And in the time right now, where only 8% of Major League Baseball players are Black American. And now the All Star game, I can report, was a success. And the events even began several days before the actual All Star game with the Ken Griffey Jr. HBCU Classic and the Major League Baseball Futures game the following day, which is a game comprised of minor league All Stars. There were several Black American players in the Futures game, which is a positive sign for MLB. I can remember the first time I covered one of these future games, and there were only three Black American players in the game. So there were a lot more this year, which is great. And Drew, now you made like you made this concept aware to me back in February when you and I were talking, having discussions before we began our podcast. When you sent me an op-ed by New York Times columnist Ezra Klein explaining the PR strategy that Steve Bannon and Donald Trump believe in, which is putting so much nonsense into the media cycle that the public becomes distracted and cannot focus on everything, cannot focus on what is important. As the drama around the Epstein files and whether or not they would be released continued to reach its peak, clearly it looks like Trump is back to his playbook. As one would believe, there are many reasons for Trump to want to distract the public's attention. Now, over the last few days, Trump tweeted and called for the Cleveland Indians baseball franchise
Yeah, for the
to
last few weeks.
go back to calling themselves Redskins. He says both teams should revert back to their previous names immediately, despite all of the Native American groups who have spoken out for years against the racist nature of the names. Trump says that Native American people like to be referred to as Indians and Redskins, which any fact check will prove not to be true. But with Trump, we know fact checks mean nothing to his supporters. The Washington football team is looking to build a new stadium and has said and Trump has said he will not facilitate a new stadium deal if Washington does not change back to its old name. And then finally, Drew, our university, Columbia, where we met, they were back in the news, acquiescing to Trump after the school lost federal funding because of Trump withholding it a few months back, as he jumped on the student protest against genocide in Palestine on the Columbia campus in 2024. They announced this week that more than 70 students are set to be punished for their involvement in that, along with a protest at the Butler Library this past May, which I was not even aware of, Drew. More than 80% of the students who will be punished will be hit with suspensions between 1 and 3 years, with the majority being hit with 2 year suspensions, sources say.
Yeah. The $200 million, I believe it was $200 million that Columbia paid will not be the end of the matter. I think there was actually another settlement uh, since then. But yeah, $221 million in fines over 3 years, according to the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University. And the dean of our old school, Jelani Cobb, is actually a staff writer at the New Yorker magazine. He wrote of the semester that ended recently, quote, "The biggest mistake that some universities have made in responding to the White House has been to presume that it is operating in good faith. It is not. Efforts to engage with it have yielded escalating punishments and leadership turnover but little by way of concession. The fight over academia is longstanding in this country, and this is a fever stakes. This is a fever pitch in the fighting, but it's not over. It is interesting though that the settlement happened the way it did, though. That is because the interesting thing that is going on is that President Trump is very good at taking hold of the media narrative and changing the topic whenever he wants, or at least he used to be. The thing that is that Trump did not invent conservatism by any means. He did not invent the conspiracy theories invented by QAnon, which are just rehashes of old stereotypes that are often rooted in anti-Semitism and racism and all the rest. But he did do a remarkable job in taking advantage of them. Um, he did take over the reins of the Conservative Party in this country in a spectacular fashion, and has used it to take complete control over the entire Republican Party apparatus for over a decade now. All banking on the promise that he was going to solve everyone's problems and take a secret deep state of people who were rooting the lives of ordinary Americans on. The whole point of the QAnon thing was not to protect girls and children from abuse. It was, excuse me, it was the insidious idea that all these people who were doing these horrible things were liberals. They were all Democrats, members of the media, academia, and finance, and that they were all on the left. Um, though that is the thing that made this movement toxically partisan. Democrats did not believe a word of it until it was reported read by the Wall Street Journal, which, by the way, is owned by the same company that owns Fox News, that Trump is in the Epstein file. Reuters Ipsos found shortly after that 69% of people think the federal government is hiding details of the case. And that's across all parties, by the way. And that only 35% of Republican respondents approved of the White House's handling of the situation. A full 63% of people who entered a Quinnipiac poll disapproved of the handling of the case, although they did find that 40% of Republicans did approve of Trump's handling of the situation. I think that the the I think that that is what has caused Trump to have so much of a looser grip on the movement he has built over the back of all this pre-existing stuff. But it also shows that the idea of it that all Republicans are good and fighting for righteousness and Democrats are all evil Marxists is built on a foundation of sand. I mean, it is true that it's never true that all members of one political party are either all evil or all good and uncomplicated. And now that central pillar has as the very online right starting to bump up against Trump, and the movement is starting to falter. It hasn't broken, but it might. Um, the Atlantic's Charlie Wurzel hit the nail on the head actually in a recent story he titled "The Desperation Donald Trump's Posts." In this, he observed that Trump's social media postings resemble his online behavior shortly after the January 6th insurrection. Also observed that the president was posting, quote, AI generated images of officials from the Obama administration and former FBI director James Comey in orange prison jumpsuits arrayed in a Brady Bunch style grid. The center of the image reads the Shady Bunch. Along the same lines, Trump is posted a caps laden message to his followers last week, demanding that they move on from the Epstein hoax, calling it bullshit from the lunatic left. He is lashing out on the defensive and seemingly unable, or at best unwilling, to control his screen time. End quote. Um, Trump has brought back this name change issue that was settled for the Washington sports team, what, half a decade ago? Longer? Um,
Yeah. The name change was about like half a decade ago. Like first they were called the Washington football team, and now they're called the Commanders. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's also floated the idea of somehow taking away the citizenship away from Rosie O'Donnell, an actress, a frequent Trump critic, despite the fact that she was born upstate New York. So there's just that's not a thing. Trump arguably got into politics seriously after uh, toying with the idea on and off for years because of former President Obama. MAGA could be seen as a reaction to the whole Obama era, and now he's going out of his way to accuse his predecessor of treason. And just the other day, he was wandering around on the roof of the West Wing of the White House, or I think it was the West Wing, and shouting to reporters, which I think was just it's just an odd thing to say. But because it isn't really working, the New Yorker's Benjamin Wallace Wells pointed out that Trump's improbable comeback last year was because, quote, in the post-pandemic atmosphere of fury and distrust, Trump moved much more nimbly than the Democrats to expand his support among people who are only irregularly interested in politics. And he has reached a group that is young, non-white, male, and less likely to have a college degree. That group and the podcasters whom they supply with an audience has seemed to draw on Trump's persona as an outsider and a fighter against the establishment. And yet, in the 6 months since the inauguration, what Trump, despite adopting a cruel and autocratic style, has given them are Republican establishment policies. He has a budget that cuts Medicaid, stripping 17 million people health insurance, gives huge tax breaks to the rich, a military intervention in the Middle East. A CNN poll recently suggested that the Americans who strongly approve of the Trump presidency, one measure of its base, is now at its lowest point at any point between his first and second terms. End quote. And that was before we got to Trump's base. The hardcore members are indeed trying their hardest to make sense of this within the MAGA orthodoxy, but that isn't helped by Trump's insistence that they are stupid, or that he doesn't, or claiming he doesn't act, or outright claiming he doesn't want their support now if they keep going on about the Epstein case. And now Trump has moved Ghislaine Maxwell from who was the former girlfriend of Jeffrey Epstein, and also has been convicted of being a participant in his crimes. He moved her from a maximum security prison, where she would be normally, to a minimum security prison, where she technically should not be according to federal rules. And he had the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, who at one point was Trump's defense lawyer, to negotiate with Maxwell. Her only point for hope for freedom at this point would be a presidential pardon, which has led many people to wonder if that's why that Trump's former personal attorney, now Deputy Attorney General of the United States, is speaking with this woman. Um, I can't think of another reason why Trump would send his former attorney to do that. Speaker Johnson, uh, the Republican from Louisiana, recently shut down the House early rather than let a bipartisan resolution calling for the release of the files to go forward. Which is and a release of the Epstein files and the so-called Epstein list, if it does exist, it would have been released, but it has not been blocked by the speaker. This could be a distraction, or it could be confirmation of something that the base doesn't want to hear, or it could be none of that. But it is weird to see Trump out of control of a narrative that his supporters hear all day, every day. It is appropriate, actually, the Roaring Lions is making our debut when we are. After all, we are all waiting on bated breath to see whether Trump can actually succeed in getting everyone across the political spectrum to shut up or not. And Samori, you and I know pretty well that a lot of Columbia people across the world are going to be roaring at the idea of the administration in Morningside Heights giving into Trump's demands. I guess the Roaring Lion title is, accidentally kind of genius.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and do you think that part of the reason why Trump targeted Columbia and went after them the way he did is because Obama graduated from there?
I don't know. Is the honest answer. It could be that. It could just be that, you know Trump is an Outerburg kid from Queens. Uh, it could just be that he wanted to go to Columbia and couldn't get in. He did eventually go to an Ivy League university at the University of Pennsylvania. But it could just be that it's the Ivy League institution from his hometown, and so that created a national fixation. But that's me speculating. That I don't have any proof of that. What do you
Yeah,
think?
right. And to your point, we are definitely two lions. We're also both Leos for everybody who does not know. And I know you had a birthday that passed not too long
Yeah, and
ago.
so did you. Happy birthday.
Yeah, yeah. Same to you, my brother. Yeah, so yeah, but we definitely are two lions that are roaring and are not happy with the things that have gone down between Trump's pause on Colombia and the things that Colombia has acquiesced to. Uh, and Drew also made the story the past few weeks, past few days, over the past week was the shooting that took place here in New York in Midtown with the gunman really saying that he suffered from CTE, and we know that it cannot be determined whether a person has CTE while they are alive. That can't be determined. So no diagnosis can be made when a person is alive. So he was just coming up to he had himself in his head. He convinced himself that he had CTE, and some of the things that were going wrong in his life was because he played football in high school, which is where he did not play in the NFL. Definitely, I have not heard that he played in college, and so up until high school. So he convinced himself that was why he had all his problems. And he was crazy enough to drive from Las Vegas to Midtown Manhattan with an RA-15. And it's crazy, man. It's crazy. I know you sent me an article from the Atlantic about the whole CTE situation, but what was your thoughts on all of
I
this?
think it was an AR-15. Well, mass shootings are never justifiable. And he may or may not have had CTE. And there has been a whole laundry list of cases and um, liability for professional sports, especially the NFL about CTE. This is something that is not something we should tolerate, not something that we should celebrate. Even though I've seen some people do that, quite disturbingly. But I think there is a larger conversation to be had about just health and safety, especially when you're young. Like there's a constant tension that I don't think will ever go away between, uh, you know, kids with dreams of playing for the Cowboys or whoever, and uh, wanting to get into it, but also keeping them safe and the evolving medical science on that. I think that it's also a question about medical injury and um, compensation and just uh, and in the sports industry in general, college or professional, major league or minor league, that is something the Roaring Line is going to spend a lot of time talking about. But yeah, it is a and it's also a Second Amendment issue of keeping guns out of the hands of people who are dangerous without impeding the rights of people who are not dangerous. And it's something that is, I think, the really tragic moment beyond the people who were killed. Um, it's just how routine this has become. Mass shootings, like that's just it's not. It's become something we're so used to. It's like the in between the baseball team scores and the weather.
Yes, that is the thing that comes to my mind the most when I think about this tragic incident is how this country has a gun problem. And like I'm someone who look, guns kill people, right? Guns kill people. Anyone can take a gun and end your life and anybody's life with a gun. So I'm the kind of person like this may seem really radical, but I don't feel like anybody should be allowed to have a gun. Um, Definitely, I don't feel like anybody should be able to buy an AR-15 and over the counter. All right, in certain states, if you if your record is clean, you can just walk up when you're over 18 or 21, whatever it is, and just buy an AR-15. I mean, how is that legal? How is that possible? I mean, what do people think somebody who's buying that kind of gun? I mean, what do they think they're going to do with it? Like that's my question. Like how can somebody be allowed to buy an AR-15 in certain states? I mean, what are they going to do with that? So I mean, it just out of hand completely. And to be honest with you, man, like here in New York, I walk past people every day who I feel like are subject to just do anything crazy. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's just, yeah, man. Like this country has a gun problem, and there are too many people here who want to look the other way and just make BS excuses and not hold the system and each other as citizens accountable for this. So,
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said. I don't think that banning guns entirely is something that I support, but I do agree. I do agree, and actually, most consistent polling consistently shows that most people do agree that we do need mandatory background checks and and
I
uh,
mean,
red
yeah,
flagging laws that sort of thing.
yeah, yeah. Because Drew, like this guy had some kind of, and like, it killed me how when the first thing first happened, like the first few hours, people were like, the news all over the news, it was reported that he had no significant criminal history. But then as the days went on, you hear about all these different times where the police, had to stop him and question him and put him in cuffs. I mean, that's bad enough for a person to be licensed to be able to carry a gun. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, the red flags were there. I mean, everybody flipped it, so it's crazy, man.
Yeah, yeah, it is something we're going to be talking about a lot as this show keeps going. Subscribe for more, and we'll see you in the next one.
Yes. See y'all soon.